The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Catherine's back as she stumbled through the dusty main street of Redemption Creek. Her worn boots dragged through the dirt, each step a battle against exhaustion and hunger. 3 days without food had left her hollow, desperate. The silver locket around her neck, her mother's last gift, felt heavy with the weight of what she was about to do. The general store loomed ahead, its weathered sign creaking in the hot wind. Catherine's trembling fingers clutched the locket as she pushed through the door. The cool darkness inside offered momentary relief, but her vision swam. She approached the counter, where a stern-faced merchant stood counting coins. "Please," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need food. I can trade this." She held up the locket, the silver catching the light filtering through the dusty windows. "It's real silver. It was my mom. She'd fled her uncle's house in Kansas 3 weeks ago, escaping his plans to marry her off to a cruel cattle baron twice her age. The bruises on her arms had faded, but the memory of his grip, his threats, still haunted her dreams. The door opened behind her, flooding the store with sunlight. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor, deliberate and confident. Catherine didn't turn around, too focused on fighting back tears of desperation. "She'll need provisions for a month," a deep voice said. "Flour, salt, coffee, dried meat, beans, and a proper coat. Nights get cold." Catherine spun around. The man standing behind her was tall, powerfully built, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway he'd just walked through. Sun-darkened skin spoke of years working outdoors, and his hands, resting casually on his belt, were calloused and strong. But it was his eyes that caught her, a striking gray, like storm clouds, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore simple clothes, a dark shirt rolled to his elbows, leather vest, worn jeans, and boots that had seen countless miles. A hat shadowed his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He looked to be in his early 30s, with an air of quiet authority. "I can't accept charity," Catherine said, lifting her chin despite the exhaustion pulling at her. "I have my locket. Keep it." His voice was firm, but not unkind. He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "Gold isn't what we need here." His eyes held hers. "You are." Catherine blinked, confused. "I don't understand. My ranch, 10 miles west of here. I need help, cooking, mending, keeping the place from falling apart while I work the land." He nodded to the merchant. "Pack those supplies. Add a riding skirt and gloves." "I don't know you," Catherine protested, even as hope flickered in her chest. "You could be worse than what you're running from?" He tilted his head, those gray eyes seeing too much. "I'm James Cordero. Ask anyone in this town. I don't lie, I don't cheat, and I sure as hell don't hurt women." He paused. "You work for your keep. Honest labor, honest pay. You want to leave after a month? I'll pay your passage anywhere you want to go." The merchant snorted. "He's telling truth, miss. James Cordero's the most honest man in 3 counties. Keeps to himself, though. Lost his wife 2 years back." Something in James's expression shifted, a flash of old pain quickly hidden. Catherine understood that look. She carried the same shadows. "1 month," she heard herself say. "Then we reassess." James nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Fair enough." He turned to the merchant. "I'll settle up. Have everything ready in an hour. Outside, The heat hit them like a wall. James gestured to two horses tied at the rail, a big buckskin gelding and a smaller paint mare. "You ride?" "Some," Catherine admitted. "It's been a while." "You'll remember." He untied the paint's reins and held them out. "This is Sage. She's gentle, but smart. She'll get you home safe." Home. The word struck something deep in Catherine's chest. She hadn't had a home since her mother died 3 years ago. The ride to James's ranch took them through landscape that stole Catherine's breath, despite her exhaustion. Red rock formations rose like ancient cathedrals against the endless blue sky. Sagebrush stretched in silver-green waves, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk's cry echoed. The air smelled of dust and wild herbs and possibility. James rode ahead, straight-backed and comfortable in the saddle. He didn't push the pace, checking back occasionally to ensure she kept up. He didn't try to fill the silence with empty words, and Catherine found herself grateful for that. They crossed a shallow creek where cottonwood trees offered blessed shade. James dismounted to let the horses drink. "What's your name?" he asked, not looking at her directly, giving her space. Catherine Wells." "Catherine." He tested the name, nodded. "Suits you." "How so?" "Strong. Classic. Not fancy, but real." And glanced up then, a slight smile softening his features. Like good craftsmanship. It was perhaps the strangest compliment Catherine had ever received, but it warmed her nonetheless. The ranch appeared as they crested a hill. A sturdy house of adobe and timber, a barn, corrals, and beyond them, rolling grassland where cattle grazed. It wasn't grand, but it was solid, well-maintained. A place built to last. "It's beautiful," Catherine breathed. "It's work," James said, but she heard the pride in his voice. "Every day, dawn to dusk, sometimes through the night. But it's mine, free and clear." He looked at her directly. "And while you're here, it's yours too. You're not a servant, Catherine. You're not property. You're a person, and you'll be treated as such under my roof." Tears pricked Catherine's eyes. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with such fundamental respect. The house's interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture worn smooth with use. A kitchen area with a cast-iron stove. 2 bedrooms. James showed her to one with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the eastern hills. "It's not much," he said, "but it's private. Door has a lock." He set her bag of supplies inside. "You rest tonight. Work starts tomorrow." But sleep eluded Catherine that night. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch. Horses moving in the corrals, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through the eaves. Through her window, stars blazed in numbers she'd never seen in the city, so bright they cast shadows. She thought about James Cordero, this stranger who'd seen her desperation and offered dignity instead of pity. What demons drove a man to such solitude? What grief had carved those lines around his eyes? Tomorrow would bring answers, she supposed. Tomorrow would bring work, purpose, a reason to wake up that wasn't just running from something, but moving toward something. For the first time in months, Catherine felt the faint stirring of hope. Dawn came early, announced by a rooster's crow and the low of cattle. Catherine dressed quickly in her new work clothes, practical and sturdy, and found James already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. "Morning," he said, handing her a tin cup. "Coffee's strong. Fair warning." It was indeed strong enough to wake the dead, but Catherine drank it gratefully. "What do you need me to do?" "Breakfast first. Then I'll show you around. Explain the routine." He pulled out a chair. "Sit." The meal was simple. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, but prepared with competence. As they ate, James outlined her responsibilities: cooking, cleaning, mending, maintaining the vegetable garden, and helping with lighter ranch work when needed. "I won't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself," he said. "And if something scares you or seems too dangerous, you tell me straight. No judgment." The morning passed in a blur of information. James showed her the root cellar, the smokehouse, the chicken coop. He explained the water pump, the best way to get the stove to draw properly, where he kept supplies. His instructions were clear, patient, and he never spoke down to her. In the afternoon, he taught her to milk the cow, a placid beast named Molly, and laughed when Catherine squeaked in surprise at the first successful stream hitting the bucket. "You're a natural," he said with a smile. He said, and the praise made her glow. Days fell into a rhythm. Catherine rose with the sun, prepared meals, tended the garden where tomatoes and beans grew in neat rows. She learned to make bread that didn't come out like rocks, to tell when the stove was hot enough for baking, to preserve vegetables for winter. James worked from dawn until well past dusk, mending fences, moving cattle, training horses. He came in exhausted, smelling of sweat and leather and the land itself. But he never failed to thank her for meals, to ask about her day, to treat her as an equal. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply existed. "I understand," Catherine said softly, and she did. 2 weeks into her stay, a storm rolled in from the mountains, black clouds and lightning that split the sky. Rain hammered the roof as Catherine worked in the kitchen, preparing supper. James came in soaked to the bone, water dripping from his hat. "Fence broke in the north pasture," he said. "Have to ride out and fix it before the cattle wander." "In this?" Catherine looked at the sheets of rain visible through the window. "That's dangerous." He grabbed his rain slicker. "Keep supper warm. I'll be back in a few hours." He wasn't. Catherine paced the kitchen as darkness fell, and the storm intensified. 3 hours became 4, then 5. Thunder shook the house. She tried to tell herself that James knew this land, that he could handle himself, but fear coiled tight in her stomach. When she finally heard hoofbeats in the yard, she rushed to the door. James slid from his horse, clearly favoring his left side. As he climbed the porch steps, Catherine saw blood mixing with rainwater on his shirt. "You're hurt." She pulled him inside, ignoring his protests. "Sit down. Let me see." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing if you're bleeding." She used her sternest voice, the one she'd used on her younger cousins years ago. "Shirt off, now." James obeyed, wincing as he pulled the wet fabric over his head. Catherine's breath caught. His chest and arms were sculpted with hard-earned muscle from years of ranch work. Every line and plane testament to physical labor. But that wasn't what made her hands tremble. A deep gash ran across his ribs, still oozing blood. "What happened?" "Caught it on barbed wire in the dark. Stupid mistake." He watched as she gathered clean cloth and whiskey. "Catherine, I'm fine. You will be when I'm done." She wet a cloth and began cleaning the wound. "This is going to sting." When she poured whiskey over the gash, James hissed but didn't pull away. Catherine worked with steady hands, cleaning and bandaging. Acutely aware of his proximity, his skin was warm under her fingers, his breathing slightly uneven. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "I nursed my mother through her final illness. You learn." Catherine secured the bandage and finally looked up, realizing how close they were. James's gray eyes were darker in the lamplight, fixed on her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You scared me," Catherine admitted. "When you didn't come back, I'm sorry." His hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. His calloused fingers were surprisingly gentle. "I didn't mean to worry you." They stayed frozen in that moment, the storm raging outside, something equally powerful building between them. Catherine's heart pounded. She should step back, maintain proper distance, but she couldn't make herself move. James broke the spell, pulling his hand away and standing. "I should change into dry clothes. Thank you again for—" He gestured at the bandage, then disappeared into his room. Catherine cleaned up the medical supplies with shaking hands. Something had shifted tonight. An invisible line crossed. She felt it in her bones, terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. The next morning, they danced around each other with careful politeness, neither mentioning the moment in the kitchen. But Catherine found her eyes drawn to James constantly. The way sunlight caught in his dark hair, how his hands moved with such assurance as he worked, the rare smile that transformed his entire face. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one afternoon as she watched him gentle a skittish horse, speaking in low, soothing tones, infinite patience in every movement. This strong, kind, broken man who'd offered her dignity when she had nothing left. But what could come of it? She was temporary help, a woman with no prospects, running from a dark past. And he was still clearly grieving his lost wife, building walls around his heart even as he opened his home. 3 weeks into her stay, trouble arrived in the form of 3 riders, rough-looking men with hard eyes and harder weapons. Catherine was hanging laundry when they rode up. Every instinct screamed danger. "Well now," the leader said, a scarred man with tobacco-stained teeth, "ain't you a pretty thing? James Cordero here?" "He's working," Catherine said, keeping her voice steady. "Can I give him a message?" "Message is simple." The man dismounted, and Catherine stepped back. "This land sits on water rights we need. Mr. Cordero's been polite about refusing our offers, but our boss, Silas Kane, ain't a patient man. This is James's land, free and clear. For now." The scarred man stepped closer. "Things can happen to folks living out here all alone. Accidents, fires, people disappearing." His eyes raked over her. "Pretty women especially need protection. The lady said Mr. Cordero's not here." James's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood by the barn, rifle held casually but ready. "I'd suggest you ride out before your welcome gets any colder." The scarred man held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just delivering a message, Cordero. Kane's final offer, 10,000 for your land and water rights. 1 week to decide. Here's my answer. No, not for 10,000, not for 100,000. Now get off my property." The riders left, but their threat hung in the air like smoke. James waited until they were out of sight before lowering his rifle. His jaw was tight, eyes cold with anger Catherine hadn't seen before. "Who's Silas Kane?" she asked. "The worst kind of man." James checked his rifle, reloading from habit. "Rich, powerful, doesn't believe laws apply to him. He's been buying up land around here, running out smaller ranchers. He wants this property because I have year-round water from the creek." He looked at Catherine, expression softening slightly. I'm sorry you got pulled into this. I'm not leaving, Catherine said firmly. Not when you might need help. Catherine, 1 month, remember? I agreed to 1 month. I keep my promises, James Cordero. Something flickered in his eyes, gratitude mixed with something deeper. You're stubborn. I prefer determined. That night, James taught her to load and shoot his spare rifle. They practiced in the fading light. Catherine's shoulder aching from the recoil, but her aim steadily improving. Good, James said, standing behind her to adjust her stance. His hands on her shoulders sent warmth through her entire body. You've got a steady hand. That's half the battle. And the other half? The will to actually pull the trigger when it counts. He stepped back, his expression serious. I pray you never have to, but if Kane's men come back, I'll do what needs doing, Catherine promised. The week passed in tense preparation. James stayed closer to the house, always armed. Catherine learned the signs of danger, distant dust clouds, unusual quiet among the animals, the feeling of being watched. Kane's deadline came and went without response from James. 2 nights later, Catherine woke to the smell of smoke. She bolted from bed, heart racing. Orange light flickered through her window. Fire! She ran into the main room. James! He was already up, pulling on boots. The barn. Stay inside. Like hell. Catherine grabbed the rifle he'd taught her to use. You need help. No time to argue. They ran outside together. The barn's far corner was ablaze, flames climbing the wooden walls. James's horses screamed inside, panicked. Get the horses out, James shouted, running for the water pump. I'll fight the fire. Catherine sprinted to the barn, smoke stinging her eyes. Inside was chaos, flames spreading fast, horses kicking their stalls in terror. She grabbed halters, working with shaking hands to free each animal, slapping their rumps to send them galloping to safety. She'd freed 4 of the 5 horses when a beam cracked above her head. Catherine looked up in horror as fire-weakened wood gave way, plummeting straight for her. Strong arms grabbed her, yanking her sideways. She and James hit the ground hard, the burning beam crashing where she'd stood seconds before. James covered her body with his, shielding her from sparks and falling debris. The last horse, Catherine gasped. Forget the horse. We need to go. But Catherine was already moving, crawling through smoke to the last stall. The trapped mare shrieked, eyes rolling white with terror. Catherine fumbled with the latch, coughing, vision blurring. Finally, it opened. The horse bolted past her, nearly trampling her in its panic to escape. James caught Catherine's arm, hauling her toward the door. Behind them, more of the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. They burst into the open air, gasping, covered in soot and ash. The barn was lost, but they'd saved the horses. James pulled Catherine away from the collapsing structure, both of them coughing violently. Only when they reached the house did he spin her to face him, hands gripping her shoulders. What were you thinking? His voice was raw with emotion, anger and fear and something else. You could have died. So could you, Catherine shot back, and I wasn't leaving that horse. Damn the horse. James's control finally snapped. I've already lost. I can't. He broke off, jaw working, and then he was kissing her. Catherine froze in shock for half a heartbeat, then melted into him. His mouth was demanding, desperate, speaking everything he couldn't say with words. She kissed him back with equal fervor, hands fisting in his soot-stained shirt, all the tension of weeks finally breaking like a dam. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. James rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't you dare apologize." Catherine's hands cupped his face, making him look at her. "Don't you dare." "Catherine, I'm a broken man. I have nothing to offer but hard work and danger, and you have yourself. That's enough." She meant every word. More than enough. James's eyes searched hers, seeming to find what he needed. He kissed her again, softer this time, tender where the first had been desperate. Dawn found them sitting on the porch, watching smoke still curling from the barn's remains. They'd checked on the horses, all safe in the corral, and now sat close together, James's arm around Catherine's shoulders. "Cain did this," James said quietly. "Sent his men to burn me out." "What do we do?" "We?" He looked at her. "We," Catherine confirmed. "I'm not leaving, James. You can't make me." "I should," he said, but his arm tightened around her. "You'd be safer away from here. I've been 3 days later, they rode into town together, a united front. James went straight to the sheriff's office while Catherine headed to the general store for supplies. She was comparing fabrics when she felt eyes on her back. Turning, she found herself face to face with the man from her nightmares. Her uncle, Marcus Wells, stood in the doorway, his expensive suit incongruous in the rough frontier town. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on her with predatory satisfaction. "Catherine, I've been searching for you for weeks." His voice was smooth, controlled. "Time to come home." Catherine's blood turned to ice. She looked for escape routes, but Marcus had positioned himself between her and the door. Her hand instinctively went to her pocket, where she'd taken to carrying a small knife. "This is my home now," she managed, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Don't be foolish, child." Marcus stepped closer. "I've traveled 3 territories to find you. Mr. Cain has been most helpful. Seems you've been living in sin with a local rancher." He smiled coldly. "James Cordero, isn't it? Cain mentioned he might be having an unfortunate accident soon." Understanding crashed over Catherine. "You're working with Cain." "A mutually beneficial arrangement. He gets the land and water rights. I get my wayward niece returned to fulfill her obligations. The marriage to Thomas Garrett will proceed as planned." "I'll die first," Catherine said flatly. "That can be arranged." Marcus's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "Now you're coming with me." "Let her go." James stood in the doorway, his voice deadly calm. But Catherine saw the fury in his eyes, the rigid control keeping violence barely leashed. Marcus's grip tightened. "This doesn't concern you, Cordero. She's my niece, and I'm taking her back to Kansas." The lady said no. James moved into the store, each step deliberate. "Now you're going to let her go, walk out that door and leave town. Because if you touch her again, the only place you're going is to the undertaker." "You're threatening me?" Marcus laughed, but it was forced. "I have the law on my side. Family rights. You have nothing." The sheriff appeared behind James, hand resting on his pistol. "I've been hearing interesting things about you, Mr. Wells. Seems there's warrants for your arrest in Kansas. Fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder of a business partner. Strange that you didn't mention that when you inquired about your missing niece." Marcus's face went white. "Those are lies." "Telegrams don't lie." The sheriff stepped forward. "Now, you have 2 choices. Leave town on the next stage, or I arrest you right here. What'll it be?" Marcus looked between the three of them, calculating odds. He released Catherine's arm slowly. "This isn't over." "Yes," James said softly, "it is." They watched Marcus leave, his shoulders stiff with barely contained rage. Only when he was gone did Catherine's knees buckle. James caught her, pulling her close. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you. You're safe." Catherine clung to him, shaking with reaction. "He would have taken me. Not while I'm breathing." James pulled back enough to look at her face. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. These past weeks, I've been trying to fight it, but I can't anymore." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe already have fallen, and if you feel even a fraction of the same." "I love you," Catherine interrupted. "I think I started falling the day you told me I wasn't property, that I was a person." "I'm still falling, James. Every single day." His smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. "Then marry me. Not because you need protection or a home, but because I can't imagine waking up without you. Because you make me believe I can be happy again. Because you're the bravest, most stubborn, most incredible woman I've ever met." "Yes," Catherine breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed right there in the general store, to the amused applause of the gathered townspeople. For the first time in years, Catherine felt truly, completely free. The next few days moved in a blur. Kane, learning his alliance with Marcus had collapsed, and that the sheriff was investigating him for arson, quietly dropped his pursuit of James's land. The man had enough legal troubles without adding more. James and Catherine planned a simple wedding. The town's preacher agreed to perform the ceremony at the ranch, where the barn's rebuilding was already underway with help from neighboring ranchers who respected James's integrity. The evening before the wedding, they sat on the porch as the sun set in brilliant golds and reds. Catherine leaned against James, his arms secure around her. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "Not about marrying you, about whether I can be a good wife. I don't know much about running a ranch or being a partner." "Hey," James tilted her chin up. "You've already proven yourself 100 times over. You're strong, capable, brave. You faced down armed men and burning buildings. You saved my horses. You stood up to the man who terrorized you." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I don't need perfect, Catherine. I just need you." "I need you too," she whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." They sat in comfortable silence until the stars began appearing, brilliant against the darkening sky. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said softly. "Anything." When we're truly married, will it," she hesitated, face warming despite the cool evening air. "Will it hurt? I've heard stories, and after everything with my uncle's threats about that horrible man." James turned her gently to face him, his expression serious and tender. "Catherine, I need you to listen to me. What happens between us will only happen when you're ready, when you want it. And I'll be gentle, patient. I'll never hurt you." His hand cupped her face. "Some things might be uncomfortable at first. That's natural. But pain? No. Not if we go slow, if we take our time." "Will it hurt?" she asked again, needing the reassurance, her voice barely above a whisper. James's eyes held hers, storm gray in the fading light, full of love and understanding. "Only if you try to resist," he said softly, then quickly clarified at her startled expression. "What I mean is, if you tense up from fear, it makes everything harder. But if you trust me, if you let yourself relax and trust that I'll take care of you, Then it'll be gentle. Beautiful even. Together, Catherine. Everything we do together. At your pace, always. Tears pricked her eyes. Good tears this time. I do trust you, completely. Then we'll be fine, James promised, kissing her forehead. Better than fine. And if you're ever scared or uncomfortable, you just say so. We stop. No questions, no pressure. My job is to love you, Catherine, not scare you. She nodded, believing him in her bones. James had proven his honor 100 times over. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The wedding took place at sunset the next day. Catherine wore a simple cream dress the townswomen had helped her make, wildflowers woven into her hair. James stood waiting by the rebuilt barn's foundation, looking handsome in his best clothes, eyes locked on her as she approached. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher asked James if he took Catherine to be his wife, his "I do" rang clear and certain. When Catherine spoke her vows, her voice steady and strong, she saw tears glisten in James's eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. James, you may kiss your bride. James cupped Catherine's face tenderly and kissed her as the assembled guests cheered. In that moment, surrounded by their new community, standing on land they would build their future on together, Catherine felt something she'd thought lost forever. She felt home. 5 years later, Catherine stood in the rebuilt barn, watching James teach their 4-year-old daughter, Rose, to feed the horses. The little girl's laugh rang out, pure and joyful, as a mare gently lipped grain from her palm. Gentle just like that, James encouraged. See, she trusts you. Catherine rested a hand on her swollen belly, where their second child grew. The ranch had prospered. James's hard work and Catherine's business sense had expanded their operation. They'd helped 3 other families fleeing abuse establish themselves on neighboring land, creating a community of support and friendship. The barn door opened, and Rose's godfather, the sheriff, entered. Catherine, letter for you. She opened it, then smiled. A letter from a cousin in Kansas, one of the good ones, informing her that Marcus had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for his crimes. Thomas Garrett, the cruel man Marcus had tried to force her to marry, had died of illness shortly after. She was finally, truly free of that past. James came over, Rose on his shoulders. Good news? The best. Catherine folded the letter away. It didn't matter anymore. Not really. Her past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. This, James, Rose, the new baby, their ranch, their life, this was what mattered. Ice cream, Rose demanded. You promised, Papa. So I did. James lifted his daughter down with a laugh. What do you think, Mama? Can we spare time for ice cream in town? I think, Catherine said, kissing her husband soundly. That sounds perfect. As they loaded into the wagon, the 3 of them plus one on the way, Catherine looked back at the ranch. The house James had built for them stood solid and welcoming. Gardens bloomed with vegetables and flowers. Cattle grazed in green pastures. The rebuilt barn stood tall, better than before. They'd built this together, from ashes and fear and desperate hope. They'd built a home, a family, a future. Happy? James asked, taking her hand. Catherine smiled, squeezing back. More than I ever dreamed possible. The wagon rolled toward town, carrying a family toward tomorrow, leaving only dust and laughter in their wake. The autumn wind carried the scent of changing seasons as Catherine stood in the kitchen, her hands working dough for the evening's bread. Through the window, she could see James in the corral, working with a young stallion, a beautiful creature with a coat like midnight and eyes that held both fear and fire. Rose sat at the table, carefully drawing pictures with the colored pencils James had brought from town. At 6 years old now, she had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. Their son, Samuel, toddled around the kitchen on chubby legs, recently turned 2, and exploring everything with fearless curiosity. "Mama, can I help Papa with the horses?" Rose asked, not looking up from her drawing of what appeared to be their family standing in front of the barn. "After your lessons," Catherine said, smiling at her daughter's eagerness. "You promised Mrs. Henderson you'd practice your reading." Rose sighed dramatically, but pulled out her primer. Catherine hid her smile. Her daughter had inherited stubbornness from both parents in equal measure. The sound of approaching horses made Catherine look up. 2 riders crested the hill, not threatening, but unfamiliar. She instinctively moved closer to the rifle James kept by the door, though her hand didn't reach for it. Not yet. James had already seen them. He secured the stallion and walked to meet the visitors, his posture alert but not aggressive. Catherine watched through the window as words were exchanged, saw James's expression shift from wariness to surprise, then something she couldn't quite read. When he gestured toward the house, all 3 men heading their way, Catherine quickly checked her appearance and smoothed her apron. Company was rare enough to be noteworthy. James entered first, his face thoughtful. "Catherine, we have guests. This is Thomas Blackwood and his daughter, Emma." The man who followed James inside was perhaps 50, with weathered features and kind eyes. But it was the girl who caught Catherine's attention. 16 or 17, with dark bruises fading on her wrists and a haunted look Catherine recognized all too well. The girl kept her eyes down, shoulders hunched as if making herself smaller. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Emma, please sit," Catherine said warmly, already moving to pour coffee. "You've traveled far." 3 days from Colorado, Blackwood said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Your husband's reputation reaches far, Mrs. Cordero. They say he's an honest man who helps those in need." He glanced at his daughter, who still hadn't looked up. "We need help." Over coffee and fresh bread, the story emerged. Blackwood was a widower, a miner who'd struck a modest claim. A local gang, led by a man named Rake Donovan, had been terrorizing smaller claim holders, forcing them to sell for pennies or face violence. Blackwood had refused. In retaliation, Donovan's men had attacked his camp, destroyed his equipment, and assaulted Emma. "She fought them off," Blackwood said, his voice breaking slightly. "My brave girl fought them. But they said they'd be back, that next time." He couldn't finish. Emma finally looked up, and Catherine saw the steel beneath the trauma. This girl wasn't broken. She was burning with contained rage and fear, a combination Catherine understood intimately. "Why come to us?" James asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Because Donovan's moving south, buying up land and water rights. He's got his eye on this valley." Blackwood met James's gaze directly. "I figured you'd want to know what's coming. And I hoped—" He looked at Emma again. "I hoped maybe my girl could stay here, somewhere safe, while I go back and settle things." "No," Emma spoke for the first time, her voice sharp. "Papa, I'm not leaving you." "You're not going back to that," Blackwood said firmly but gently. "Emma, please. I can't fight Donovan and worry about protecting you at the same time." The room fell silent. Catherine looked at James, saw him weighing the situation. She knew what he was thinking. Taking in Emma meant painting a target on their backs if Donovan did come south. But she also knew her husband's heart. "She can stay," Catherine said before James could speak. She met his eyes, saw the question there, and nodded. "We have room, and she'll be safe here." James's expression softened with love and gratitude. "Emma stays," he confirmed. "And Mr. Blackwood, you're welcome here as well. Might be better to stay together, fight this properly." "I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm offering." James leaned forward. "I've dealt with men like Donovan before. They're bullies and cowards underneath the bluster. But they're dangerous because they travel in packs. You can't face them alone." "I will run for my claim," Blackwood said stubbornly. "I'm not suggesting you run. I'm suggesting we fight smart." James glanced at Catherine, who nodded. "Stay here a few days. Rest. Plan. Then we'll figure out how to deal with Donovan before he becomes everyone's problem." That night, after settling Emma in the guest room and ensuring Blackwood was comfortable in the barn's guest quarters, Catherine and James finally had a moment alone. They stood on the porch, the stars brilliant overhead. "You think I did the right thing?" James asked quietly. "I think you did the only thing," Catherine replied, taking his hand. "That girl needs help, James. She needs to see that not all men are monsters, that the world can be kind. She reminds you of yourself." "She does." Catherine leaned against him. "If someone had offered me safety when I needed it most, you did offer me that. You saved me, James. Maybe we can do the same for her." "We," James repeated, pulling her closer. "I like that word." Over the following days, Emma slowly emerged from her shell. Catherine gave her space, but made sure she knew she wasn't alone. They worked together in the garden, Catherine teaching her to preserve vegetables for winter, while sharing quiet stories about her own journey to the ranch. "Did you ever stop being scared?" Emma asked one afternoon, her hands busy shelling peas. Catherine considered the question carefully. "The fear changes. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes manageable. You learn you're stronger than you thought. You learn to trust again, carefully." "I hate that I'm afraid," Emma said, her voice fierce. "I should be brave like you." "Oh, honey." Catherine set down her work and took Emma's hands. "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. You fought off those men. You're here, surviving, learning to live again. That's the bravest thing I know." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I feel broken." "You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." Catherine squeezed her hands. "And you don't have to heal alone." Meanwhile, James and Blackwood spent their days preparing. James sent word to neighboring ranchers, men he trusted, about the potential threat of Donovan's gang. He also began teaching Emma to shoot, despite her father's initial protests. "She needs to know how to protect herself," James said firmly. "Running from danger doesn't make it go away." Emma proved to be a natural shot, her anger finding a useful outlet in the precise discipline of marksmanship. Catherine often watched from the house as James patiently corrected her stance, praised her progress, treated her with the same respect he showed everyone. "Your husband is a good man," Emma said to Catherine one evening as they prepared supper. "He is," Catherine agreed, "the best I know. Papa says men like him are rare." Emma chopped vegetables with focused attention. "That most men just take what they want." "Some men do," Catherine said carefully. "But not all. Not even most, I think. The good ones are worth holding on to." She paused. "You'll learn to tell the difference in time. You'll learn to trust your instincts again." 2 weeks into the Blackwood stay, trouble arrived. Catherine saw the dust cloud first, too many riders moving too fast. She called out a warning, and within minutes, James had the family inside the house, rifles distributed, a defensive position established. 6 riders approached, led by a man whose swagger was visible even from a distance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar bisecting his face and eyes that held casual cruelty. "That's Donovan," Blackwood said, his voice tight with controlled fury. James stepped onto the porch alone, rifle held casually, but ready. Catherine watched from the window, Emma beside her, both women armed and prepared. "Donovan," James called out, "you're on private property. State your business or ride on." "Business is simple, Cordero." Donovan's voice was rough, amused. "I'm looking for Thomas Blackwood and his little girl. Heard they might have come this way." "You heard wrong." "Now, I don't think I did." Donovan leaned forward in his saddle. "See, Blackwood owes me. Damaged some of my boys when he ran. And the girl?" His smile was predatory. "Well, she's got debts to pay too." Catherine felt Emma tense beside her, heard the girl's sharp intake of breath. She touched Emma's shoulder gently. "Steady. James won't let him near you." On the porch, James' voice hardened. "You've got 3 seconds to turn around and leave. After that, you're trespassing, and I'm within my rights to defend my property." "You threatening me?" Donovan laughed. "There's 6 of us, and 1 of you." "Not quite." The sheriff stepped around the corner of the barn, rifle ready, flanked by 2 deputies. Then 3 more men emerged from the stable. Neighboring ranchers, James had quietly asked to stand by. Suddenly, the numbers weren't in Donovan's favor. The gang leader's expression shifted, calculation replacing amusement. "This ain't over, Cordero." "Yes," James said softly, dangerously. "It is. You come near this ranch again, near the Blackwoods, near anyone in this valley, and we won't be calling the sheriff. We'll be calling the undertaker. Your choice." Donovan stared at James for a long moment, seeming to measure the man's resolve. Whatever he saw there made him pull his horse around. "Enjoy your little victory," he called back. "Won't last." But they rode away, and everyone knew. "Why would you risk your family for me? You barely know me." "Because someone did it for me," Catherine said simply. "Because everyone deserves safety and dignity. Because you're worth fighting for, Emma Blackwood, even if you don't see it yet." Emma collapsed into Catherine's arms, sobbing, great wrenching sobs that spoke of all the fear and trauma she'd been holding inside. Catherine held her, rocking slightly, letting her release the poison that had been building. Later, after Emma had cried herself out and gone to bed, Catherine found James checking the perimeter one final time. "She'll be all right," James said, reading Catherine's expression in the moonlight. "She's strong." "She is, but strength shouldn't be tested so young." Catherine leaned into him. "We're collecting strays, you and I." "Building a family," James corrected. "A real one, made of choice and loyalty, not just blood." He kissed the top of her head. "I like it." "So do I." Over the following weeks, they heard through various sources that Donovan's gang had moved on, pushed out by the unified resistance of the valley's ranchers. The sheriff had also sent word to federal marshals about the gang's activities, making the territory too hot for them to operate. Blackwood reclaimed his mine, this time with help from neighbors James connected him with. But Emma chose to stay at the ranch. "Just for a while longer," she said, though everyone suspected it would be more permanent. To help Mrs. Cordero with the children, to figure things out. Catherine understood. Emma needed time to heal, to rebuild herself in a safe place. The ranch could give her that. Winter came to the valley in a blanket of white. Snow transformed the harsh landscape into something magical. And Rose and Samuel delighted in building snow figures and having snowball fights with their father. Emma had been with them for 6 months now, and the change in her was remarkable. She smiled more easily, laughed at Samuel's antics, and had even started tentatively talking to the young ranch hand James had hired to help with the expanded operations. A shy boy named Daniel, who treated her with careful respect. Catherine was preparing Christmas dinner, the house warm with the scent of roasting meat and baking bread, when Emma approached her with unusual nervousness. "Mrs. Cordero? Catherine, can I talk to you?" "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" Emma twisted her hands together. "Daniel asked if he could court me. Properly, I mean. He spoke to Papa and to Mr. Cordero already, but he said he wouldn't proceed without your blessing too." Catherine set down the spoon she'd been using and gave Emma her full attention. "And what did you tell him?" "I said I needed to think about it." Emma's voice was small. "I want to say yes. He's kind and patient, and he doesn't make me feel afraid. But I don't know if I'm ready. If I'm too broken to." "Emma, look at me." Catherine waited until the girl met her eyes. "You are not broken. You're healing, yes, but you're whole. And only you can know if you're ready to let someone court you." She paused. "But I'll tell you this. Daniel is a good man. I've watched how he is with the horses, how he treats everyone on this ranch. He's gentle and honorable. If you decide to give him a chance, I think he'll honor your pace, your boundaries." "You really think so?" "I know so." Catherine smiled. "And if he doesn't, your papa, James, and I will have words with him. But I don't think we'll need to." Emma threw her arms around Catherine in an impulsive hug. "Thank you for everything, for taking me in, for teaching me, for showing me that good people exist." Catherine hugged her back, blinking away tears. "You're family now, Emma. That's what family does." Christmas that year was the fullest the house had ever been. Blackwood came from his mine. Daniel joined them for dinner, and even the sheriff and his wife stopped by with gifts for the children. The house rang with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold world outside. As Catherine looked around the crowded table, at James telling stories that made everyone laugh, at Rose and Samuel's bright faces, at Emma smiling shyly at Daniel, at all these people they'd gathered into their unlikely family, she felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking?" James asked softly, catching her expression. "That we're blessed," Catherine replied. "That we built something beautiful here." "We did," James agreed, taking her hand under the table. "And we're not done yet." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had weathered the winter well. New foals were born, and the garden began producing again. Emma and Daniel's courtship had progressed slowly but steadily, and there was talk of a summer wedding. But spring also brought unexpected visitors. Catherine was hanging laundry when she saw the wagon approaching. 2 women sat in the front, one elderly, one middle-aged, and as they drew closer, Catherine felt a shock of recognition. "James," she called, her voice sharp with surprise. The older woman climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for her years. She looked at Catherine with fierce blue eyes, taking in every detail. "You'd be Catherine Wells that was," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Catherine Cordero now," Catherine replied carefully. "And you are?" Margaret Wells, your father's aunt. Your great-aunt, if you want to be precise about it. The woman gestured to her companion. This is my daughter, Harriet. We've been looking for you for near a year. Catherine's world tilted. She'd thought herself alone in the world except for the family she'd built here. I don't understand. Why? Because your family, Margaret said simply. Because when I heard what that bastard Marcus did to you, pardon my language, I knew I had to find you. Make sure you were all right. James had arrived, standing protectively close to Catherine. Margaret's sharp eyes assessed him in a single glance. You'd be the husband, she said. James Cordero, I've heard things about you too. Good things, mostly. Mostly? James's tone was dry. They say you're stubborn, hard-headed, and don't suffer fools. Margaret smiled. All qualities I admire. They also say you're honest, loyal, and you treat your wife like she hung the moon. Those qualities I admire even more. How did you find me? Catherine asked, still trying to process this development. Hired a detective once Marcus went to prison. Wanted to know what happened to you. Make sure you were safe. Margaret stepped closer. My dear girl, I'm sorry. Sorry for what Marcus did. Sorry I didn't know about it sooner. Sorry you were alone when you should have had family. Catherine felt tears threatening. I have family, here. She gestured to the house, where she could see Emma watching from the window, Rose playing in the yard. I can see that, Margaret said gently, and I'm not here to disrupt it. But I'm an old woman with more money than sense and no one to leave it to. You're my blood, Catherine. I'd like to know you, help if I can, and maybe be a part of this family you've built. James squeezed Catherine's shoulder. Your decision, he murmured. Catherine studied her great-aunt, this fierce, unexpected woman who'd tracked her across territories. She thought about family, about the different kinds it came in, blood and choice, old ties and new. Stay for dinner, she heard herself say. Meet everyone. We'll figure the rest out. Margaret's smile was brilliant. I'd like that very much. That evening, the house was once again full. Margaret and Harriet charmed everyone with stories of the Wells family history. The good parts Catherine had never known. It turned out her father had been Margaret's favorite nephew, a good man who died too young, leaving his daughter in the care of his brother Marcus. Your father would have hated what Marcus became, Margaret said. Would have been proud of what you've made of yourself, though. As the night wore on, Margaret made a proposition. She owned property back east, investments, businesses. She wanted to sign half of it over to Catherine. I don't need it, Catherine protested. We're doing fine here. It's not about need, it's about right, Margaret said firmly. It's your inheritance, what your father would have wanted you to have. You can do whatever you want with it. Save it for your children's future, donate it to help other women escaping bad situations, or just sit on it. But it's yours. Catherine looked at James, who nodded slightly. We'll think about it, she said carefully. That's all I ask. Margaret leaned back, looking satisfied. Now, tell me about this ranch. I want to know everything. As summer blazed across the valley, life continued its rhythm. Emma and Daniel married in a simple ceremony by the creek, both of them glowing with happiness. Margaret and Harriet had stayed on, occupying the guest house James hastily built. Becoming seamless parts of the community, Catherine found herself mentoring more women who arrived seeking safety. Word had spread about the ranch that took in those running from danger. Some stayed, some moved on, but all left stronger than they'd arrived. With Margaret's help, Catherine formalized what had started organically. A haven for women fleeing abuse, a place where they could heal, learn skills, and rebuild their lives. The Wells Haven, Margaret insisted on calling it, after Catherine's father. He always helped people, Margaret said. This honors his memory. One evening, Catherine stood on the hill overlooking the ranch. Below, she could see James teaching Samuel to ride, Rose helping Emma in the garden, Daniel mending fence, Margaret and Harriet sitting on the porch with other women from the haven, all of them laughing at something. James found her there, as he always did. Thinking deep thoughts? Thinking about how far we've come, Catherine said. When I stumbled into Redemption Creek, starving and desperate, I never imagined this. Neither did I, James admitted. Thought I'd live out my days alone, just surviving. Then you showed up and reminded me what living actually means. Catherine turned to him, this man who'd saved her in every way that mattered. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. More every day. I love you too. James pulled her close. You know what I think about sometimes? What? That first day, when you tried to trade your mother's locket for food, and I said gold wasn't what we needed. He smiled. I was right. Gold, silver, money, none of it matters compared to this. To you, our children, the family we've built. You're the treasure, Catherine. You always were. She kissed him as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, their ranch, their home, their sanctuary, their legacy stood strong against the landscape. They'd built something lasting here. Not just a ranch, but a community. Not just a marriage, but a partnership that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Not just a family by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by love. And they were far from done. As they walked back down the hill hand in hand, Rose ran up to meet them, chattering about the baby rabbits she'd found. Samuel toddled behind, determined to keep up with his big sister. Emma waved from the garden, Daniel beside her, both of them working together as evening fell. This was what mattered. This was what they'd fought for. This was home, and it was just the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of James and Catherine's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.